everyone, good morning. I'm Ashley with the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership, otherwise known as MBEP. Welcome to the second session of our Central Coast Climate Summit series, co-organized by regional partners Green Power, California State University of Monterey Bay, the Central Coast Climate Collaborative, Monterey Bay Economic Partnership, and the California Green Business Network. Here's a quick reminder of our agenda for today. We have a packed program and a great lineup of presenters. We're incredibly grateful for their time and participation as they continue to urgently respond to the health, humanitarian, climate, and economic crises we're currently facing. Given the rapid escalation and all-consuming nature of the pandemic, it's somewhat unthinkable that we're also in the midst of one of the greatest environmental and health catastrophes our state has ever seen as we enter the first gigafire in our modern history. But even amid the most difficult times, we must remind ourselves that the fundamentals of our economy and equitable societal progress is predicated on a sustainable, healthy, and resilient environment. Therefore, the need for more comprehensive sustainability objectives to form part of our region's goals, organizational strategies, operations, and decision-making criteria remains even more critical to our collective futures. Today's session will cover the potential for maximizing these synergies. It'll highlight just a few of our region's largest and leading businesses that are designing and executing improvement initiatives to address triple bottom line goals simultaneously. And regardless of where your organization is on this path, just by being here says that all 160 or so of you want to do more. And you want to be part of the longest and greatest movement the world will ever see. Even if it's just to start a deeper conversation within your organization, that's how it started at MBEP and many others. You all get that we're out of time and that every moment, every now is an opportunity for change. It's crucial then that we increase our level of urgency and collective focus to help our region, including small to medium-sized businesses, governments, and advocacy groups, to establish just and equitable solutions to the challenges of our climate emergency. While this is a webinar-style session, we encourage you to ask your questions in the Q&A box when prompted, and stay till the very end to participate in a call to action poll so that we can connect you to local resources. We'll send all participants a link to this recording with responses to questions that don't get answered, in addition to the resource links shared in the chat. Lacey Rock, CSUMB's Sustainability Director and my passionate climate action comrade, will now highlight some takeaways from our first session on academia and share how CSUMB has been playing a leadership role in campus sustainability planning. Lacey, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Way back in the beginning of May, while we were all in the early stages of adjusting to shelter in place and pandemic life, we held the first in our series of regional climate conversations. We had over 100 people RSVP and join us from all over the state for a conversation focused on integrating climate change into our educational systems, both in a formal and an informal way. We rediscovered that regardless of what your field of study might be, climate change will impact us all, and we all have a responsibility to educate, inform, and act. We learned that language is very important. For example, using the term building a sense of place instills more hope and connection than the term addressing climate change, which can seem like an impossible challenge. We also learned that within all fields of study, including environmentally focused fields, there's a knowledge gap, which ranges from not understanding the depth of intersectionality, like climate change and justice, to apathy and a lack of connection to the natural world, as well as naivety around how to successfully navigate the institutional behavior challenges that hinder action on climate change. In addition, higher education is a business, and we have a responsibility to not just educate on climate change, but to take a leadership role in shifting our operational and business practices. At CSUMB, we are implementing a single-use plastic ban by 2023. We champion sustainable economic development through programs like the College of Business's Sustainable Hospitality degree. We have integrated leading-edge certification systems like the Living Community Challenge into our master plan guidelines and future building feasibility studies. If you're not familiar with the Living Community Challenge, think of it as LEAD on steroids, and be sure to check out the link in the chat. We recently completed our 2020 Campus Inclusive Sustainability Plan, which outlines 3 core goals: planting 2,030 trees, achieving carbon neutrality and zero waste, all by 2030, all of which are acted upon through a lens of justice and equity. It's a lot in 10 years, but I believe we can do it. And as we listen to state leaders, business leaders, and education leaders speak today, I think we can all agree that 2020 has been a difficult year, but it's also a glimpse into what a good scenario in our future might be if we don't take meaningful change right now. It's a call to action, and I look forward to 2030 being a year when our motivation, our ambition, and our power to respond with empathy and integrity become realized, and we turn the page on averting the most catastrophic impacts of climate change. At CSUMB, we are with you in this, and we will be working earnestly to meet our goals. It's my pleasure now to turn to Leslie Austin, who's representing Green Power. She's an amazing partner and co-organizer of this event and of our regional, state, and national actions on climate change and climate justice.
Good morning. Thanks so much, Lacey. As Lacey said, I'm Leslie Austin, an organizer with the nonprofit Green Power. We're an initiative of the Romero Institute in Santa Cruz, and in 2016, we launched a campaign to fight climate change by expanding the reach of Monterey Bay community power on the Central Coast. Today, we work with businesses like yours and government, education, agriculture, and really anyone who's interested in having support to identify and implement energy efficiency and renewable energy solutions. And of course, there are many incentives today, which makes shifting to renewable energy one of the best investments. You'll have an opportunity actually in a little bit to hear about San Benito Health Foundation's project and also some of the work of Granite Rock, and these are two of our partners. Before I introduce our keynote today, one quick housekeeping item, and you heard Ashley reference this, but just to be clear in the context of this part of the presentation, you will need to use the Q&A for any questions that you have. And once the Assembly member completes his remarks, we'll move to a 5-minute Q&A, and I will offer as many questions as we have time for to the Assembly member. Any unanswered questions will be addressed in the recap of today's session, and that information will become available in the coming days. With that, I'd like to say that it is my personal honor to introduce our keynote today, Assemblymember Robert Rivas. Assemblymember Rivas represents California's 30th Assembly District, and last month, at the end of his first term, he was appointed chair of the Assembly Agriculture Committee. When you stop to realize that the grandson of a farm worker who grew up in farm worker housing is the chair of one of the most significant legislative committees in California legislature, and that committee provides oversight to the largest business in our state, agriculture, and our state is the 5th largest economy in the world, you can't help but recognize the significance of his story and the motivation and hope it offers. I first learned of Robert Rivas when he served on the San Benito County Board of Supervisors. My community was organizing around concerns regarding potential fracking, and we went to Robert looking for support. We knew immediately that we had a friend and advocate of the environment, and as Assembly member, we've watched him lead on landmark legislation to protect our environment while ensuring environmental justice, to identify climate goals and best practices for the state's natural and working lands, to provide quality, dignified housing for farm workers, and to protect the health and safety and economic security of agriculture workers while preventing disruption of the nation's food supply. It is my sincere honor to welcome Assemblymember Robert Rivas today.
Hey, Leslie. Good morning, and I really appreciate that introduction. It is so great to be with all of you this morning. I very much appreciate MBEP, all the advocacy that MBEP does in the Monterey Bay region on housing and certainly on the environment, on so many important issues to the Central Coast and to the County of Monterey and in this tri-county area of San Benito and the County of Santa Cruz. But really the dedication to coordinate this regional climate summit. I know this has been a very challenging year, certainly one of the most, if not the most challenging in recent decades. And over the last few months, the California legislature has worked very hard. We have worked hard to do our best to ensure that we mitigate the challenges of this unexpected global pandemic. And it should go without saying that looking beyond just ensuring that we mitigate this public health crisis, economic recovery here in California and really throughout the United States, it has to depend first on stabilizing COVID-19, containing and preventing the spread of this incredibly contagious and what has turned out to be a deadly virus. But as I've mentioned many times, having just a couple months away from ending my first term in the California legislature, and I can tell you that there was no shortage of problems or crises here in our state of California prior to COVID-19. And these are problems and crises that are now just exacerbated because of COVID-19. And this includes climate change. Our climate crisis here in California is no laughing matter. This is a significant problem. And a lot of us understand this. We know this. This is why I've, valued environmental policy, why I've prioritized climate change issues. Not only my time in the legislature, but my time as a member of the Board of Supervisors in the County of San Benito. But reflecting on my first term, one of the most impactful experiences I had in my first, my first term, was having the opportunity to be one of 3 members of the California State Assembly to be invited to attend and participate in the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, otherwise known as COP25, a Conference of the Parties. And the purpose and the goal of the conference was to finalize these official rules that would govern the Paris Climate Agreement, the historic 2015 global agreement that would best limit worldwide carbon emissions. And the original intent of the Paris Agreement was to have this official rule book in place, and it was set to take effect this year in 2020. But unfortunately, the conference I attended, it became the longest on record because consensus could not be reached on these official rules around this very important historic agreement to minimize emissions around the world. And so the result of these high-stake climate negotiations was failure. And so it was, and I say it was failure because the agreement at the time was that they were going to push off these important these areas that they could not find consensus around establishing carbon markets, very similar to California's cap and trade program. But what they did is they had intended to push it off for another year, which would have been this year. But now, because of COVID-19, I think it's safe to say that this is a decision that's going to be pushed off well into the future. But nonetheless, having experienced this conference, having gone, having engaged with delegates from other countries from around the world, having the opportunity to learn about climate change and how it is, and how it will impact each and every one of us, was inspiring. It was educational, it was shocking, and it was motivating. And an article I read that summarized and highlighted COP, this conference, one comment really resonated with me. It was this. It was from a member of the Union of Concerned Scientists. His take away from the conference was that he had never seen such disconnect between what the science requires and what the climate negotiations delivered in terms of meaningful action. And clearly what we lack in our fight against climate change is meaningful action. California has been considered a leader on climate change, but one can seriously argue that past state policies have been short-sighted and have allowed corporations, have allowed our leaders in our political leaders to avoid addressing the real issue. And the last couple of weeks, many people have questioned and criticized our governor for issuing executive orders, ending the sale of all new gasoline-powered passenger cars and trucks by 2035 here in California. Just yesterday, the governor signed an executive order pledging to preserve 30% of California's land and coastal waters by 2030. And it also aims to bolster carbon sequestration in our state's natural and working lands. And when you consider the facts before us, 5 of the 6 largest wildfires ever recorded in our state have occurred this year. We've had an increase in excessive heat warnings, an increase in hazardous air quality, more and more rotating utility blackouts. The governor's actions, these executive orders, are not only ambitious and feasible, but they're meaningful. It's the type of leadership that is required for California's climate crisis. It's these executive orders that are a step in the right direction, but we certainly have a lot of work to do. And I've been actively involved, as Leslie mentioned, in climate issues in my time as a county supervisor in San Benito. And it's time for us as a state, as policymakers at the local level, at the state level, to think very differently when it comes to climate change. As a lifelong resident, there's absolutely no doubt that we are truly on the front lines when it comes to climate change and the negative impacts associated with this changing climate here in the state of California and the Central Coast. And that's why we've got to do a lot more to meet this challenge. In my first term, I'm proud of the environmental work we've done, having authored Assembly Bill 936, which established new oil spill protections in our state. Assembly Bill 1628, which added meaningful involvement to the definition of environmental justice so that all voices are heard here in the state of California. And as I've always said, we certainly have got to think globally about climate change, but we must do everything we can locally. And that's why at the state level, when it comes to environmental policy, it is very challenging to get good policy passed. And sending good policy to Governor Newsom, because we do have an environmental governor, we need your help. And that's why all the advocacy at the local level is so important. And that's why I really appreciate MBEP and all the advocacy and work that you guys do. Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you so much, Assemblymember Rivas, for offering us this insight into the work of the State Assembly during your first term. And actually, as I see this, it's a perfect segue into our first question. So the first question is, what do you see as the major environmental legislation in next year's Assembly session?
Right. So, excited that that Governor Newsom, when announcing the executive order to eliminate new gas-powered vehicles into the auto market in 2035, he also announced that he wants to, would like to see the legislature move to ban fracking in this state. And so certainly I'm, proud to have been contacted by some of my colleagues because of the work we have done locally in our region to ban fracking. We did it successfully in San Benito in 2014 and County of Monterey in 2016. And so I'm currently working with a group of legislators and look forward to lead an effort to ban fracking and also seek to include things like cyclic steam injection. When you look at the overall footprint of fracking in our state, it is not much. But certainly having the potential to frack is a concern because that small percentage could increase quite quickly in the future. But also looking at the efforts led by Al Marasucci around oil well setbacks to residential areas, to public spaces. That's certainly an ongoing issue. And really excited. Last year we had championed an effort around natural working lands. Very excited to learn of the governor's executive order just yesterday around this issue. The one way we can naturally sequester carbon is through our natural working lands. So certainly those are some of the issues. But again, as I mentioned, environmental policy in Sacramento is very challenging to accomplish. And that's why we need all the support, all the help we can get from all of you, especially at the local level.
Great, thank you. The second question, and I think we'll only have time for this second question, is specific to businesses. The question is, what actions are legislative leaders taking to create resources for businesses to meet climate legislative priorities?
Mm-hmm. And that's a great question. And I think that, certainly as we seek to, establish eventually our goal in the state, in my opinion, should be codifying efforts towards carbon neutrality in our state. And certainly if we are truly going to become less reliant on fossil fuels and more reliant on renewable energy, then as a state, we've got to do our part to invest in these areas and in these practices and to support the infrastructure that's necessary to accomplish these goals. And that's playing a greater role to support small businesses to meet these goals that have been set. It's very easy to set and establish goals about, goals we want to meet, whether it's in the transportation sector, whether it's, reducing emissions. But what I appreciate about Governor Newsom is when you look at his executive orders, it's creating the pathways to accomplish and meet these goals, and certainly incentivizing these climate-friendly practices is certainly a way to broadly apply, their use throughout our state. Thank you, Leslie.
Yeah, thank you so much, Assemblymember Rivas. It's great to hear your insights, and it's great to have an ally in this important work. And on behalf of us all here today, we appreciate the value you brought to our session this morning, and our sincere thanks for all you've done for the Central Coast.
Always. And, again, really appreciate the opportunity. Appreciate everything MBEP does. And Leslie, always great to see you. And give my best to Wayne.
Will do. All right, so at this point, it is my pleasure to introduce and turn the session over to Dr. Tiffany Wise-West. Dr. Wise-West is the Sustainability and Climate Action Manager for the City of Santa Cruz and recent former chair and current steering committee member of the Central Coast Climate Collaborative. With 25 years of experience in municipal environmental infrastructure planning, design, and implementation, Tiffany Wise-West specializes in collaborating across public, private, and academic sectors to deliver award-winning and impactful emissions mitigation and climate adaptation policies, projects, and programs. Tiffany, over to you.
Thank you so much, Leslie. I want to start by saying the Central Coast Climate Collaborative, otherwise known as 4C, is a membership organization that fosters a network of local and regional community leaders throughout 6 Central Coast counties from Santa Cruz on down to Ventura to address climate change mitigation and adaptation. We are affiliated with the local Monterey Bay Regional Climate Action Compact and the collaborative, and together with the collaborative, we convene representatives from local and regional government, business and agriculture, academia, and diverse community groups to share information and best practices, leverage efforts and resources, and identify critical issues and needs. I'll be putting in the chat how you can get in touch with us, our website, as well as some link to some things we're doing in Santa Cruz. Before I introduce our next keynote speaker, I'd like to remind participants to please place questions for our keynote speaker in the Zoom Q&A. Now, I'd like to introduce our speaker. In my leadership role at 4C, I've had the privilege of hearing our next keynote speaker impart valuable knowledge on several occasions to the Executive Committee of the Statewide Alliance of Regional Climate Collaboratives for Adaptation, and I am so excited to introduce her. Kate Gordon has spent the past 2 decades working at the intersection of climate change, energy policy, and economic development. Kate was appointed director of the Governor's Office of Planning and Research and senior advisor to the governor on climate by Governor Gavin Newsom on January 7th, 2019. Trained as a community organizer and later in law and regional economic development, her focus has long been on bringing diverse groups together to work towards more sustainable, inclusive economy. Prior to being appointed to OPR director, Kate was the founding director of the Risky Business Project and also served as a co-author on the 4th National Climate Change Assessments chapter on reducing risks through adaptation actions. I want to warmly welcome Kate Gordon to our summit. Kate, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Tiffany, and thank you so much to everyone who put together this amazing conversation. Really, just to echo what Assemblymember Rivas said, the work here happens at the regional and local level, and collaboratives like yours, as well as just organizations and business groups like this are so critically important to doing that work. I wanted to say a couple words about OPR before this slide, but that's okay. You can stay on this slide. A couple words about OPR. Many people don't know what the Office of Planning and Research is, and just a quick background on that. We provide long-range planning to the governor and the cabinet, particularly around land use planning, climate resilience, and climate finance, and sustainable economic development. So many of the issues that are critical to all of you. And I did want to just say a quick shout out to Assemblymember Rivas. The executive order, it's not in my slides because it just happened yesterday afternoon, but the executive order that we announced yesterday, really putting natural and working lands at the center of our climate agenda, and pushing the state toward that 30% conservation of land and coastal waters by 2030 really was in large part due to work from Assemblymember Rivas and his staff. So just really wanted to say thank you to him and acknowledge his work on those critical issues. Governor Newsom, really takes, and frankly, why I love my job and why I took this job, it really takes an integrated approach to climate change, recognizing that climate change is about impacts we're feeling now and the imperative to reduce emissions to address long-term impacts, and how we manage that transition to a carbon neutral economy, which we've said over and over, we want to get there by 2045. But a recognition that that affects every region, every sector of the state, and that every action we take on climate has, in physics terms, an equal and opposite reaction. Everything we do affects different parts of the economy and different parts of the state in different ways. That intersectional kind of regional and equity-driven approach is really the signature of the governor's agenda on climate. Next slide, please. So the first week of our administration, of course, was kind of critical on this issue, because in our first week, PG&E declared that it would be filing for bankruptcy. Soon afterward, the ratings agencies downgraded the ratings of all of our investor-owned utilities. And of course, this had a huge impact on the economy as a whole and on the state budget. And to me, it was such a stark moment and a reminder of the direct relationship between climate change, the immediate impacts that are partially a result of climate change, and our communities and our fiscal health. So really brought to bear just right away that first week the importance of taking an integrated approach of these issues. Next slide, please. And of course, part of that approach is our long-range development patterns, and just thinking about how we've developed as a state in the past, the sheer amount of our state that is in this wildland urban interface or in this high-risk fire zone, how we think about existing development in these places and really hardening and shoring up that development, and how we look at resilience into the future. Such an important part of our long-range planning and our long-range conversation with regions, particularly now that we're in this moment of recovery from our current economic crisis. Next slide. We have to think in a forward-looking way about climate change, because these impacts will increase, even with the emissions that are currently in our atmosphere that absolutely can be reduced, as Assemblymember Rivas said, through natural and working lands and through land management and other processes. Even with that, we are anticipating, this is from the California Climate Assessment, potentially a 77% increase by the end of century in the average area burned in the state if emissions continue to rise. That is a huge increase. Just underscores the need to both plan for today and plan for the future. Next slide. So wildfire is one of the risks we face as a state. There are others. California is a gigantic state and a coastal state. And so, as you all know well, we really do kind of have everything. We have sea level rise, we have extreme heat, we have mudslides, we have fires, we have drought, we have floods, we even have glacial melt in part of the state. And so when we plan, when we think about our climate policies today and our planning for the future, and again, our economic recovery, we have to think through how these impacts and how these risks need to be planned for. Next slide. And this is really just a quick slide. Many of you know this already, but just as a reminder of the relationship between those current impacts and risks that I just talked about and our emissions profile going forward. I think sometimes the climate change discussion can feel really high level and esoteric. We talk about getting to below 1.5 degrees Celsius. We talk about a global compact and diplomacy. The reason that's all so important and the reason that we need to get off of this business as usual path that you see here, that red line on the right, is that every year we continue to emit at the levels we're emitting now into the atmosphere, we're increasing our risk of these climate impacts. We're increasing severity, we're increasing frequency into the future. So essentially what is today, say, a 100-year flood is tomorrow a 20-year flood because we're continuing to emit. So there's a direct relationship between bringing down those emissions with aggressive climate action and being resilient in the face of the impacts we're feeling today. Next slide, please. There's also a direct relationship between those climate risks and our state budget, and also just the fiscal health of all of you, of your companies, of your regions, of your county budgets, of your local budgets, of your ability to continue providing services. This is a slide from the International Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, which was done for the G20. And this is a really, I think, helpful slide, and it's easy to find online, but that talks about the translation of these climate risks we talk about sometimes in an environmental context, but they actually are fiscal and economic risks as well. There's a risk from physical risk impacts from those floods, those fires, that sea level rise. There's also a transition risk. If we're investing today in things that are not part of our carbon neutral future, we're risking that those become stranded assets. We're risking having to replace those earlier than we normally would have to replace major infrastructure. So these are business decisions, and business decisions about reducing risk, but also about the amazing opportunity that's available to us as we look toward that future. Next slide. And all of those risks and opportunities in climate, of course, are in the context of other continuing issues in our broader economy, and particularly because of COVID. I don't have to tell everybody these things, but we are having all kinds of shocks to the economy right now on top of the wildfires and the ongoing climate risks. And these are just some of them. Next slide. So our big question as an administration is, how do we reimagine a more sustainable, resilient economy? How do we plan for the future? The governor is spending most of his time putting the building blocks in place to plan for that future. And I'll just talk about a couple of things he's done last year and this year to put in that foundation. Next slide. Last September, the governor put in place an executive order in 1919 that makes clear that as a state, our own asset and investment planning, including transportation and the 19 million square feet of buildings we own through our Department of General Services, our pension funds with 700 billion in assets, need to be in line with realities of these current climate impacts and our transition to a carbon neutral economy. This included a focus on reducing vehicle miles traveled and prioritizing more compact development patterns for both emissions reduction, less driving, and climate resilience, less growth into our wildland-urban interface. Next slide. This year, the governor built on that executive order with an investment framework, following up and saying the pension funds really need to put more of their funding into carbon-free indexes, move toward climate risk disclosure, and we've joined an international movement through the Coalition of Climate Resilient Investors as part of this framework. Next slide. We're also continuing in our planning processes to do technical advisory work for those living currently in high fire risk areas and to local governments trying to plan for the future as we look at those climate impacts. Next slide. There's lots going on in the last couple of weeks. The Assemblymember Rivas talked about the executive order that we put out, a groundbreaking order on transportation transformation, getting ahead of that transition to a carbon neutral economy in our transportation sector with a goal of 100% zero emission vehicle sales by 2035. That included, and go to the next slide, please, a focus on how we do that transition. And one of the key things my office will be doing for the next year is focusing on just transition. How do we make sure our economic and workforce planning is done in coordination with our climate planning so that those regions that are currently dependent on some of the industries that are in decline or that are transitioning are really prepared for that transition. So local jobs get created. So those jobs are high quality jobs. All the policy needs to happen in coordination, again, under that integrated agenda that the governor cares about so much. Next slide, please. There also have been a number of really important bills this year, in addition to those Assemblymember Rivas talked about, and there are just some here, codifying the California Climate Assessment, CEQA exemptions for priority transit projects with a focus on equity outcomes, and creating vehicles for private sector investment into these critical issues. And I have one more slide, I promise, and go to the next slide, please. The last thing I just wanted to say is that one of the other things that I've been involved in and has been really great has been this task force on jobs and economic recovery, which really allows us to have the private sector, academia, labor, business, join us in thinking through how to get to that sustainable and resilient and equitable recovery. We have an ongoing process in the task force, and we're actually integrating many task force members into policy conversations at the state level. So I think, next slide, last slide, it's a really exciting time to be doing this work. It's really challenging, I won't lie, but it's also really exciting, and just thrilled to be working with you all at the regional and local level with the businesses on the line and on this agenda to be figuring out how to do this, as the governor says, getting from the why to the how. And I will leave it at that.
Thank you so much, Kate. Wow, really, really terrific. I'll jump right into the questions. We do have a question from one of our participants that I'll start with. How and when will the governor address growing greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector? Specifically, what are his plans for state regulations or incentives that move local governments to plan for higher density infill housing along transportation corridors? For example, Senator Wiener's bills that have failed the last two legislative sessions.
Thank you. It's a really important question. And I think one of the things that we think about a lot at OPR, and again, in this sort of regional approach, is what we just did on natural working lands is a critical piece of the puzzle in terms of land conservation and management that really prioritizes carbon sinks and resilience. But the flip side of that is we have a housing crisis that's an ongoing crisis, and we have to continue with the governor's aggressive housing agenda. What that means is compact development, infill development, reducing vehicle miles traveled from our transportation sector. A couple of really important pieces of that puzzle have been put in place this last year. One is that SB 743, which was passed actually 7 years ago, finally went into implementation in July. That requires new projects to actually do an analysis of vehicle miles traveled whenever there's a new land use development project or a transportation project. That's a really big deal, actually, because it means that the environmental impact of the project now is actually explicitly about the vehicle miles traveled of that project, and we think that will make a big difference on individual projects. The governor's also prioritized housing spending into our infill infrastructure grant program to provide local governments with the underlying infrastructure for infill projects. That's been a barrier to infill development, honestly. So we've done that. And we're also looking very, very hard at continuing efforts to try to streamline CEQA around these types of projects. We were really, we thought it was really unfortunate some of the bills this year did not make it to the governor's desk on these issues. And we continue to really focus on this as a critical part of our climate picture and also our housing picture. So last thing I'll say on it is, honestly, a lot of this comes down to local government. The state government can go as far as we can go on streamlining, on prioritization, on subsidy. We are doing what we can, and we can do more, but we need local government partners to actually allow for these projects to go forward in local jurisdictions. That is just a critical part of the puzzle.
Thank you. Real quickly, we'll take one more question. Just to bring it back to businesses, I know you mentioned the private sector investment that seems really promising, but are there other resources that can support businesses, both to engage leadership on business finance, but also on helping to meet state environmental goals while having, building their own businesses equitably?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll be quick. I mean, at the end, I referred to trying to put in place some mechanisms for catalyzing private investment into these types of projects. We did, with the legislature's support, create a climate catalyst fund at our infrastructure bank that does allow for zero interest loans and loan guarantees on these types of projects. And I think that's a really important tool. We're frankly need some federal support to make that happen. One of the things that's challenging us right now, as I know you know, is that our state budget is so tied up with COVID response and with safety net programs that it's been extremely hard for us to do discretionary funding. So we're really looking for that federal support and those ways to increase private sector and philanthropic support. We're also working, and the governor has really prioritized streamlining internally and making our own processes less unwieldy and easier. Ultimately, that will translate into lower costs for business if we can just, as the governor says, put out the red carpet instead of the red tape, and that he has told us that over and over and over, that's a priority. And I think you'll see a lot of that in the January budget proposal.
Thank you so much, Kate. We're so appreciative of your time today and your expertise, and of course, your service to the state of California. Thank you so much. Also, I want to mention that we will get to the other questions. There were a couple more questions in the Q&A in the summit recaps, so be on the lookout for that. And with that, I'm pleased to introduce another esteemed Kate, our panel moderator, Kate Roberts, who is president and CEO of the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership, a regional nonprofit membership organization consisting of public, private, and civic entities located throughout the counties of Monterey, San Benito, and Santa Cruz. Over her 25 years in the high-tech industry, Kate held leadership positions in sales, marketing, partner management, and corporate social responsibility. Through MBEP, she has advanced regional solutions through intersectional partnerships. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. It's great to be here, and I'm so glad we were able to hold this event virtually, which I just want to say was kind of nice not to have to get in my car and drive to see you all, but it would be nice to be able to meet in person again, and hopefully that'll happen sometime soon. I just wanted to give Tiffany a special shout out for your leadership at the City of Santa Cruz and across the region with the Central Coast Climate Collaborative and other endeavors that have really been a shining example of how we can mitigate and adapt to the impacts of climate change. So before I bring our panelists on screen, I'd like to take a quick poll and just see who's out there in our audience today, what sectors and industries are represented in our audience. So you'll see a poll pop up. And while you guys are clicking that, I'm gonna actually do mine too. There we go. I just wanted to thank again our co-hosts, CSUMB, Lacey, all the fantastic work you do, and of course Eduardo Ochoa, president of CSUMB, as our board chair at MBEP. So grateful for all the great work you guys are doing around climate. Leslie Austin at Green Power, Brook Wright at the California Green Business Network, and of course Ashley Gower and Maya Reed and the entire MBEP team who helped make this event happen. So let's see, here we go. A lot of education advocacy. We got a lot of other. That's going to be interesting to see what that's in there. Construction, government, and a smattering of health, construction, or ag. Yeah, and retail tourism, a couple of that. Well, great. Thanks for doing that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce all 5 of the panelists, and then I'm going to turn it over to our first panelist, who's going to talk about some examples of their organization and how they're dealing with climate change, and then they'll toss it to the next one and we'll go through it like that. And then at the end of those introductions and their stories, then we'll come back and we'll have some time to ask your questions. So I'm sure you'll have a lot as you're listening to them. Please be sure to pop those into the Q&A box. So our first panelist, Rosa Vivian Fernandez, is President and Chief Executive Officer for the San Benito Health Foundation and also an MBEP board member. One of my favorite board members, Vivian, doing such fantastic work there in San Benito County, serving so many of the residents there for over 40 years. Something like over 10,000 individuals annually come through the clinic there in Hollister. And with their new satellite mobile unit, they're able to provide even more preventative and comprehensive medical, dental, vision, mental health, and health education services. After Vivian speaks, we're gonna then ask John Erskine to speak. He is Granite Rock's Director of Geological and Environmental Sciences, part of the Granite Green Team, developing green concrete mixes using locally sourced aggregate and cement replacement alternatives to significantly reduce greenhouse gas impacts. He is also responsible for Granite Rock's environmental product declarations and for implementing key green energy projects at several Granite Rock facilities. Then we're going to have Alfred Diaz Infante, who is president and CEO of Chispa and also an MBAP board member. He serves on the board of the Housing California and the California Coalition for Rural Housing. He served as a trustee of several local nonprofit education and institution boards and was a planning commissioner for the County of Monterey. Next, our panelist, Ellen Vaughan, is the Water and Climate Action Manager for UC Santa Cruz Sustainability Office. She has worked as a global warming field organizer for Greenpeace and as the Director for Sustainability for the Syracuse Center of Excellence and on water and energy nexus issues for the Public Council of the Rockies in Aspen. Last but certainly not least, we have Gunn Reuter, is President and CEO of Martinelli & Company and is driving its business growth for the future. He brings a wealth of knowledge and diverse business background experience to the position. And he holds an MBA from Stanford and is a cum laude graduate of Georgetown University. So now that you've heard about all the amazing background of our esteemed panel, I'm going to turn it over to Vivian to start us off and tell us a little bit more about how the San Benito Health Foundation is dealing with climate change and mitigation. Vivian.
Okay, good morning. So we are a different organization in terms of we're a nonprofit community health center. Next slide, please. We were founded in 1975 as a migrant farm worker clinic, and we provide medical, dental, vision, and WIC services. Next slide, please. So our project, I have here the vision and mission. I won't read it to you, but basically our goal is to provide safe and healthy communities and provide quality services that are accountable and are available to our community as need. Next slide. And so we, embarked on this project in order to make our services resilient, to make sure that they were dependable and accessible to the community in times of disaster. And you can see our building and renovation, our mobile unit in some of our panels. Next slide, please. How this started. In September 2017, there was a devastating earthquake in Puerto Rico, and we served as a sister clinic providing assistance. And we learned firsthand the importance of energy, water, and communications. And our board vowed not to have our patients and our community go through this process. And it was from this that we springboarded our energy project. Next slide, please. So the next steps. We are fortunate that we had participated as part of the Rotary San Juan Bautista, and Green Rock Power and Mint Services provided a presentation which fast forwarded our project to look at energy as a starting place in order to ensure that we would not be impacted in the future by disabling process due to environmental issues. Next slide. Again, this just provides an overview of what can happen in terms of in a natural disaster. And although we did have a diesel generator, what we observed that our sister clinics that had diesel generators, they could not find diesel, and that the diesel was not the solution, given that it does not guarantee 24/7, nor is it good for the environment. Next slide, please. So we wanted to limit the damage and also to ensure that we were environmentally conscious in our decision making in terms of how we designed our system. So our system does have a backup diesel generator, but it relies vastly on solar power, and we also can run our operations, our entire operations for 24/7 without the need of additional electricity. Next slide, please. So we looked at our board looked at an estimate of what the project would cost. Initially, we had a budget of 1.6 million. It ended up escalating to 1.8 million by the time we were done, because there are other impacts in terms of looking at your reduction of use of power through LED lighting, the roofing, retrofitting, and other aspects that needed to happen in order to ensure that this system was able to be installed and functional for the future. Next slide, please. So again, we started the project with design May of 2018, and we completed the project August 2019. Next slide, please. So overview, we have a microgrid, we're off the grid, and we made considerable changes in retrofitting into our lighting, our HVAC system, our roofing and parking lot. We installed electric vehicle charging stations as well, when we had a number of other side costs related to, or costs or investments related to the project. Next slide, please. And this is basically an overview of what the building looks like. It's 17,000 square feet. It houses all of these services, and we currently benefit from 24/7 reliability. Very critical. The first week that we were off the grid, we had a notice from PG&E that we were going to have a power outage, and we were able to continue providing services without this danger. Next slide. And again, talks about a little bit how a typical day works with these fires. We actually went down to about 50% capacity in our battery, but we still were running, and it didn't impact us in the long run. Next slide, please. And what is the future? So in the future, we will be building, we've learned from what we've done in this facility, and we will be building our future facility, a learning health center in San Juan Bautista, which will also have housing for our staff in a healthy living community blue zone concept. So we look forward to that project and further reducing carbon impact to our planet. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Vivian. We're going to toss it now over to John Erskine from Granite Rock. John.
Hello. Hi, first slide, please. Actually, the one after that. Oh, perfect. Okay, well, thank you for having me. So first I want to say that green building is a really critical tool for fighting climate change, and it's also a really important source of jobs. And for those of you who don't know Granite Rock, we're a construction and materials company headquartered in Watsonville. We were started 120 years ago in the little town of Aromas, which is located between Watsonville and San Juan Bautista. And there we operate the A.R. Wilson Quarry, which is the largest hard rock quarry west of the Mississippi. And there we dig up granite. We don't use it for countertops or anything like that. We make it into aggregate, which is for construction. We take the aggregate, rock, and we mix it with hot bitumen oil to make asphalt, which is used in roads. And we also mix it with cement to make concrete, which is made into buildings. Next slide, please. So, I've got three main points I want to talk about. First of all, is that you can't have a true green economy without having local products and materials. And it's simply because transportation is inevitably a large component of a product's environmental footprint, especially for heavy, bulky things like construction materials, which are sold and used by the ton. To move it around from A to B takes a lot of diesel. Our material mainly comes from Aromas, and it's typically consumed within about 70 to 100 miles of Aromas, as opposed to a lot of other competitors, which are importing material from Canada, Mexico, and the Central Valley. We also take advantage of rail Every day in Aromas, we load up about 100 rail cars full of rock, and we send it up to San Jose, Redwood City, and South San Francisco, where it's distributed. And basically about every rail car takes about the equivalent of about 4 or 5 trucks off the road. We're also one of the leading producers of green concrete mixes, which use reclaimed and recycled materials to reduce the amount of cement used in concrete. And these are things like SCMs is what they're called. They're things like slag, which is a byproduct of steel manufacturing, and fly ash, which is a residual from coal-fired power plants, ironically. You can see a photo there on the right. It looks like cement, it acts like cement, and a little microscope photo there. It's these little balls. And it's great because you can use that to reduce the amount of cement in concrete. And we've developed mixes that are up to 70% cement replacement, although most customers are going for like, say, 20%. And what's great about that is for every pound of cement you reduce in your concrete, you're saving about a pound of greenhouse gases. So if you can imagine a project the size of a building, that has a real impact. And third, that we've become a lot smarter in how we use our energy, how we manage our energy and produce energy as well. And that started a couple of years ago with our so-called, our smart quarry, our smart plant initiative. One of the first things we did is we just started putting a lot more monitoring equipment on all of our plants. And this has allowed us sort of real-time information about how we're using energy. A plant operator now can see exactly how much energy they're using and how much water they're using as well. And that's allowed us to do a lot more smart choices and operate our plants more efficiently. I should also say that our A.R. Wilson quarry, I'm proud to say that we've installed a 1 megawatt photovoltaic, a solar array, that reduces our energy usage about 15%. And in our corporate office, we've done a combination of efficiency upgrades and photovoltaic on the roof to reduce our energy usage by 90% at our corporate office. Next slide, please. So I'm really proud to say that our products, our concrete mixes, come with so-called EPDs, which if you've done LEED building projects, or if you're in the public sector and you're familiar with AB 262, what these are is they're like nutrition labels are for food. EPDs spell out a product's environmental impact. And these are third-party certified life cycle assessments of each step in the production process, from raw materials to the plant gate. And it scores each of our concrete mixes on 15 different criteria, including global warming potential, ozone depletion, and water usage. And what this does is it allows the consumer, it allows our customers to make more informed decisions about their materials and how green they want to be. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to very briefly, this is our corporate office here in Watsonville, where I'm broadcasting live. And the way we achieved 90% energy reduction is by a combination of lighting upgrades, HVAC optimization, and just simply putting secondary glazing on the windows. And I should do a shout out to Mint Systems here, who helped design and they built the system. That reduced our energy usage about 40%, which shows that a lot can be done just with efficiency improvements. And then we put solar on the rooftop to reduce our energy another 50% to get us to that 90% goal. Next slide, please. And I just want this kind of parting shot here. This is kind of my pride and joy that I was instrumental in getting done. And this is our 1 megawatt solar array out in Aromas. And this is 3,000 solar modules, and they are on trackers, so they move throughout the day to track the sun. And I'm just really excited that a 120-year-old quarry is being partially powered by sort of 21st century local green power. So I'm out of time, so that's all I've got, but I look forward to the Q&A. Thanks.
Great, thanks so much, John. I'm gonna now quickly go to Alfred Diaz Infante and have him share some really great stuff that Chispa is up to. Alfred.
Good morning, thank you, Kate. My name is Alfred Diaz Infante, President and CEO of Chispa. We're a nonprofit affordable housing development company founded in 1980. We were fortunate that we were able to celebrate our 40th year anniversary earlier this year. To date, we built 2,300 housing units in total, all affordable, consisting of 1,600 rental units for families, seniors, and people with disabilities, and 725 single-family homes built under our mutual self-help program, as well as our moderate income housing program. We have 2 wholly owned subsidiary companies, our property management company and our general construction company. Our commitment to building green and addressing climate change started in 2010 when we updated our strategic plan. At the time, our board chair was Matt Bogosian, Deputy District Attorney, who led Monterey County's Environmental Prosecution Unit. And he said, Alfred, we've got to start building green. Let's focus on that. So we established a goal to train staff, subcontractors, and residents on green requirements to include energy conservation, renewable energy sources, and the use of more sustainable products. We invested in sending our staff to conferences and seminars, and we strongly encourage our subcontractors to attend as well. Our property management company provided trainings for our residents on recycling and maintaining a healthy home. Here's a picture of one of our first initiatives, which was through our partnership with Grid Alternatives, a nonprofit that installs solar systems. And they also have a workforce development component where they allow the homeowner to participate in installation of the solar system. They installed, next slide, please. They installed the solar system on 165 of our homes, which represents about 23% of our single family homes. The average savings for each family was $600 a year. Next slide. Another initiative which served as a training ground for us, for our staff and our subcontractors, was the construction of a net zero home, which means that the amount of energy used is equal to the amount of new renewable energy that is created by the home. We did this in partnership with PG&E. Some of the equipment and items that were included includes a tankless water heater, electric heat pump, solar tubes, photovoltaic solar system, and including upgraded insulation and energy efficient appliances. Next slide, please. So we've incorporated what we learned through that program in our rental housing. Again, you'll see similar features. We have solar systems for the common areas, solar tubes, tankless water heaters. Here's our construction supervisor showing off the tankless water heater. And one of the things that we do during the construction is all the material waste gets recycled, so it doesn't end up in our landfill. Next slide, please. And here's something I'm really proud of. This is an apartment complex we completed in Hollister 2 years ago. We received the Gold LEED certification. Again, similar type of products, tankless water heaters, solar tubes. In this case, you'll see a picture of the solar panels on the carports there on the bottom right. One of the things that we've done is we've also implemented within our property management company initiatives to retrofit many of our equipment. We've changed our lighting to LED lights, which has resulted in 50 to 70% in savings in electric bills. We've also retrofitted our toilets, again, resulting in savings, in that case, 22%. And we've also replaced shower heads and faucets, and other things that we've done is replace our appliances with energy efficient appliances. Next slide, please. And the last two developments, both senior housing, they're 100% electric. All appliances are electric, including the furnace. And in both of our senior housing developments, it's kind of hard to see, but on the bottom right, we've installed electric vehicle charging stations. And hopefully in the near future, we're going to be buying some electric vehicles for our maintenance staff. We have about 18 vehicles. And recently we have received a couple of grants from the Central Coast Community Energy. They have a multi-unit developer electrification grant program that serves as an incentive for affordable housing developers to build all electric in order to increase reliance on fossil fuels, such as natural gas. In summary, how's CHISPA addressing climate change? We made a commitment to build green. We look for cost-effective ways to design and build energy-efficient homes and apartments. We also consider the availability of the product and the long-term care and maintenance of the product. We look for programs and incentives that are available for affordable housing through utility companies and local and state energy programs. We're also self-funding some of the improvements. Some of our older properties, we're refinancing our loans, so we're able to install energy-efficient equipment and materials. Thank you for your time, and now I would like to turn it over to Ellen Vaughan with UC Santa Cruz.
Hi, thank you. Yes, my name is Ellen Vaughan. I'm the Water and Climate Action Manager at UC Santa Cruz. So next slide, I'd like to start on why we do it. You know, why are we sustainable? And of course, we're ethical, right? We care about the future of the planet and also the future of our students' lives. They're going to be around to see a lot of this consequences of climate change. But it also happens that it's financially advantageous for us to do it. The Princeton Review does these annual surveys of incoming students, and every year we see students care about the college's commitment to environmental issues. And we're seeing more and more of these types of studies come across all industries, right? Employees and caring about the commitment of different organizations. Next slide. And so we're making sure to walk the talk and keep those students happy. So our biggest accomplishment last year was probably divesting fully from fossil fuels. So over $126 billion portfolio. And we really love this quote from the Regents Investment Committee because it's proves that, you know, we didn't just do it because maybe students wanted it or were asking for it or because it would make a good headline. We did it because we're long-term investors, and we know that moving away from a dirty and dangerous fossil fuel and turn towards a clean energy economy is a good investment. Next. And we're also the largest green power user among all higher education institutions. So we have over 50 megawatts on site at about 14 different locations. And we have arrays like this one, huge 60 megawatt plus arrays across the state to kind of offset some of our electrical use. Next. And fresh off the press, we have made a new policy to eliminate non-essential single-use plastics by 2030. So most campuses have gotten rid of plastic bags a while ago, but we're going to have to figure out creative ways to get rid of or go compostable with utility cutlery, really, you know, our forks and spoons and the clamshells to-go boxes. But the last bullet is really aggressive. We're going to phase out the purchase, sale, and distribution of single-use plastic beverage bottles by 2023. So we're really excited about that and proud to be leaders in that field. Next slide. So of course, everyone has probably heard about our carbon neutrality by 2025, very aggressive goal for the whole UC. We use the general energy hierarchy to accomplish that. We build green first, at least LEED silver is a requirement. At our sustainability office, we have tons of conservation efforts. Then we have an aggressive program to move across campus, retrofitting each building with LEDs for energy efficiency. And then sticking renewable energy on top. But I did want to speak for a second about offsets, because even after doing all this, in 2025, we're still going to have emissions and we're going to have to purchase offsets. So right now we're writing a policy to determine, you know, what characteristics of offsets will we need. Historically, they haven't always been exceptional. And we want to make sure that any that we purchase include and care about social justice, are certainly additional, which means that they really are sequestering carbon and storing it, or ensuring that other, you know, carbon isn't emitted somewhere else. And then we've got thousands of brilliant researchers across our system. So we want to advance their research and hopefully, you know, maybe keep the dollars and the projects local and partner with regional folks like you in the future on cool regional offset projects. Next. And last slide, just a little bit about how great UCSC is. I'm so proud to work here. The Sierra Club has put us as in the top 7% of, you know, the environmental schools in the nation and beyond. We just plugged in a 2.1 megawatt solar array. Of course, solar saves money over its lifetime. We switched over to biodiesel for all our diesel last year, cost neutral. Over the last 15 years, reduced our per capita water use 40%. We are purchasing green products, particularly cleaning supplies. That's a social justice issue with our custodial department, of course. And we like to prioritize equity in so much of what we do on campus. We've got a great group, the People of Color Sustainability Collective we work with, and World News and Reports ranked us 2nd last year, 4th this year in the nation for social mobility. And we couldn't do it without our awesome student groups. They challenge us and support us and participate in all these efforts to advance sustainability across the system and on campus. So, thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Ellen. Great job. UCSC, so proud. Go Banana Slugs. Well, now I'm gonna toss it over to the President and CEO of Martinelli's. Gun, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kate. This is Gun Reuter with Martinelli's. Go to my first slide, please. So Martinelli's has been in the Pajaro Valley for over 150 years. And our role in the community and our responsibility for sustainability and being a good corporate partner in this process really has lasted generations and will continue to do so. It's a priority for us and for the family. It's a priority for our brand. We're connected to natural, organic, and sustainable ingredients. That's part of what our consumers expect. So as we look at our manufacturing and bottling operations that have been here for decades, and our newer agricultural operations, we're constantly seeking for ways to increase sustainability across the board. We focus primarily on conservation and recycling, and when we're planting new orchards, focusing on high yield, efficient orchards and plantings. Next slide. In terms of conservation, well, I think Martinelli's is the oldest certified green business in the broader Santa Cruz and Monterey area. And we really focus on conserving our two major inputs. In addition to apples, it's water and energy. On the energy side, we've transitioned all of our lighting systems to utilize LED light bulbs. Although our roof at our primary 400,000 square foot facility is not strong enough to sustain a solar panel array, we've negotiated with one of the landlords at one of our neighboring facilities to install a solar panel system on their facility and then utilize that energy for our main bottling facility. In addition, on the water side, we are constantly looking ways to recycle and recapture our water that we use throughout our process. One of our main efforts in that regard is to recapture the water we use to rinse our bottles before we start bottling, recapture and pipe that to our apple department for all of our cleaning and sanitation efforts in that side of our business. That's reduced our water consumption by about 25%. In addition, on our supply chain, we're experimenting with bringing in pre-pressed apple juice from the Northwest by tanker car instead of by truck, which will reduce the amount of emissions associated with our upstream supply chain, and then downstream, delivering more of our finished goods via rail car. For us, every rail car removes about 3.5 trucks off the road. So we're gradually increasing our rail delivery where possible. Next slide, please. Recycling is key across our operations. It's worth noting that our two main facilities in Watsonville are recycled facilities. Our main bottling facility is an old Green Giant plant. Our main warehouse is an old Bird's Eye plant. But throughout the day-to-day operations of our business, we're looking at how we can recycle our materials. In terms of making the materials, and all our packaging materials on our finished goods are all recyclable. We've gone through a full redesign of our champagne-style sparkling cider product to be able to remove the plastic reseal cap that was a large part of the waste stream in our packaging, and we've completely removed that as part of the process. All the materials used in the transport and delivery of our products to our plant and going to our consumers, all of that is either recycled and repurposed by providing that back to our suppliers or back to the trucking and shipping companies so that we can continually reuse that product throughout the process. Our largest waste stream other than water from our operations is apple pulp. Currently, all of our apple pulp is it ends up at local dairies, and we're experimenting with different local groups around repurposing that pulp as a feedstock for ethanol and other higher value uses. Next slide, please. Over the last 6 years, we've been vertically integrating to save local apple orchards that were at risk of being repurposed either for other agricultural purposes or other uses. Right now, we have about 200 orchards that we've planted and about 600 orchards that we maintain and manage. Our focus there is to reduce the use of pesticides and our need for water throughout our agricultural operations. In terms of the pesticides, we've partnered with the Future Farmers of America to build owl boxes across all of our local orchards to help mitigate the rodent issues and larger pest issues at our orchards. We've also begun installing underground fencing, gopher fencing that goes down about 12 to 18 inches to deter gophers, all in the ultimate goal of reducing our need to use pesticides. Many of the older orchards here used large sprinkler systems that were somewhat indiscriminate in how they irrigated. We're converting in all of our new orchards and converting most of our older orchards to micro sprinklers and drip lines, which are much more targeted in their application of water and reduce the need for water quite substantially. We're also looking at different varietals of apples that require less chill hours for dormancy and less water to maintain and thrive, because we understand that the inevitability of the climate change here locally and the impact on our industry is real, and that we've got to prepare for the future. Next slide, please. We've planted, as I mentioned, about 200 acres of new orchards. We're looking and emphasizing organic orchards, which obviously require less input to manage. We're also experimenting and broadening our use of biological control agents, which are natural predators to insect pests that would otherwise require pesticide intervention. So often you'll see apple orchards where the ground is tilled below the apples. We are experimenting with letting that undergrowth grow and become a habitat for the predators that will combat the pests, so that we don't need to apply pesticides onto those orchards. And then lastly, we're looking at trying to take the learnings from the apple industry in the Northwest and develop high density, high yielding orchards so that we can get more apples per acre of planting and per input provided to increase the efficiency of those orchards. So thank you for your time, and I'll turn it back to Kate Roberts.
Great, thank you so much, Gunn, and to all our panelists. I'd like you all to come back and join us if you would. Please turn your screens back on. It's amazing, really, to see what all of you have been able to do to embed environmental stewardship into your organization's core values and develop these really practical solutions toward resiliency and toward a carbon-free world. So I want to salute all of you. I think when we constructed this panel, we really wanted to look across sectors. So having health, housing, education, agriculture, construction, having all of those different perspectives and seeing what each different type of organization is doing to embrace climate change, mitigation, and adaptation. It's been really inspiring. So thank you so much. Okay, a couple questions have come in, and we have time for just a few. So a question for Gunn. Can you talk briefly about how being one of the earliest certified green businesses may have driven some of your sustainability initiatives?
So we have been focused on how our packaging, in particular, of developing different packaging that is more sustainable and is more recyclable. So over the decades that we've been around, and certainly since we've been a certified green business, we've taken and removed packaging. I mentioned the plastic caps from our process. We've constantly tried to, especially as our newest plant, although it's not so new, but the Green Giant facility, when we took that over, developing that plant where we can recycle specifically, again, the water in our plant that I mentioned, to make sure that we could recycle the water. At our old plant in downtown Watsonville, it's much more difficult. It was not designed with that in mind, but our new plant and our new lines, we're currently installing and developing the plan for 2 new high-speed lines, utilizing the cutting edge technology that we can to recycle our inputs, as well as install equipment that is more efficient and less energy intensive. So really, it's been part of the fiber, I think, of our business as we design the manufacturing process with that green mindset.
Great, thank you for that. Another question here is maybe bringing it down a level to, if I'm listening and watching this webinar, how would you suggest, and this is open to any of the panelists that would like to answer, how would you recommend I approach my supervisor, my board, or my leadership team to initiate a conversation about creating a climate action steering committee or other actions specific for my organization? How does somebody who's really a champion for this type of effort get the conversation started with their leaders? Who wants to take that?
We actually looked at this from the perspective of it aligns with our mission. And we are fortunate, our board is very supportive. And we looked at the cost and the long-term savings. But sometimes it's not about savings, it's about, being budget neutral and still looking at the resiliency that this brings about. The project related to our housing, our employee housing, is a combination of employee housing and knowing that many of our employees commute. So there is a double impact that they cannot find housing and they're driving long distances. So having a housing project for employees makes sense. So again, it's looking at budget neutral, it's looking at what's environmentally feasible and how does it align with your mission.
John, did you have something to add?
I think that our experience is that, we're a business, we need to make a profit, and we've couched a lot of our term, everything has to be couched in terms of, what is the business proposition? A lot of these things started from our customers, like the green concrete, that our customers wanted that for their lead products. And that kind of got the ball rolling, starting things. And then we look at things through efficiency. Reducing energy is green, but it also saves money. So I think that it's important to always keep an eye on the business case and start from there.
Excellent. Yeah, and we have time for just one more question, which is related to that. What are some actions that smaller businesses with perhaps very limited budget could implement rather easily and quickly? Does anyone have any quick share on that would help our audience, that maybe has a little bit less of a budget or less of an organization that they could do?
I don't know if this is directly applicable, but I can tell you one thing that we've used for some of our energy efficiency improvements is that PG&E actually has a lot of incentive programs. We've done some projects where we took a burner and we were able to put improved insulation on it. So we were able to get that paid for in part by PG&E. So PG&E has representatives that will kind of walk you through this process. Even things, I don't know if they do lighting anymore, but there's a lot of different things you could do to kind of improve your efficiency and get some subsidies for it.
Great. Well, I wish we had more time because I know there's so much value and insights that you all can provide, but sadly we're out of time and almost at the end of our program. I wanted to thank you all again so much for your commitment to this, for the conversation. I hope it stimulated questions and ideas for our audience, and we're just so proud to have you all as part of our MBEP network and part of this collective effort going forward. I just wanted to say for those of you in the audience that at our MBEP State of the Region that's happening on December 2nd, tickets go on sale next week. We're going to delve into this issue around resiliency and the cross-cutting issue of environmental, economic, and social impacts of climate change in our region. So I hope you'll join for that virtual event. Okay, thanks panelists. We're going to now move on and I'm going to introduce Brook Wright, who is the Strategic Initiatives Manager for the California Green Business Network, who helped certify both our MBEP offices in Santa Cruz and in Marina. It's been a wonderful partnership and we look forward to doing more together. Brook has more than 10 years of experience developing communications, marketing, and outreach solutions for mission-driven organizations. And she manages the regional Monterey Bay area green business program and supports their business development and strategic initiatives. Over to you, Brook.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you so much for the introduction. And I just wanted to say I am so grateful for this opportunity to partner with you and all the staff at MBEP. It's been a dream of mine for a while, so it's really nice to see it happening. Also, it has been heartwarming to hear from certified green businesses today on the panel, including MBEP. To ensure everyone understands the program, I'll quickly share what our program is and then pass it to Leslie Austin, who will be joining me in a few moments with this closing session. So the California Green Business Network is a collaboration between diverse stakeholders, which is the theme of our closing session, this word collaboration you'll be hearing. Locally, our 3 counties and several municipalities participate in the Monterey Bay Area Green Business Program, which you can learn about at the link I just put into the chat. As you heard from Gunn at Martinelli's, We provide free sustainability consulting that helps businesses conserve resources, mitigate climate change, and prevent pollution. Businesses almost always save money, and we have a lot of fun marketing and promoting and networking with them. I'll add that much of my personal joy working on this program over the last 2 years has been watching diverse college students partake in our internships and launch promising careers in the climate action field right here in our region at certified green businesses, such as Regeneration in Watsonville, and also at Monterey Bay Community Power, who's working on their green business certification right now. I encourage any curious business leaders to enroll today to access our state-funded microgrants and free resources right now. We have $500 microgrants for any business that gets to a certain threshold in our program, and you can learn about that on our website as well. You can enroll for free at greenbusinessca.org. And with that, now I will pass it to Leslie.
Great, thank you so much, Brooke. A quick time check. We have about 5 minutes before we close our program today. So I just want you all to know that we are committed to keeping on time. And I will go quickly, as will Brooke, through this last little bit. We wanted to frame our closing today with a concept of collaboration. And this quote that you see on the slide, competition makes us faster, collaboration makes us better. We all know this moment in time is no time to slow down, and we think a story of collaboration, especially when it comes to dealing with an existential threat like climate change, demonstrates the importance of better over faster.
The scale of climate change is impossible for any single stakeholder to mitigate without collaboration. But even just a few stakeholders coming together can amplify the impacts for each of those stakeholders. So we're closing this session with a case study of our collaboration in San Benito County.
The Green Business Program and Green Power are both active members of the San Benito County Chamber of Commerce's Green Committee. The Green Committee is an example of business leaders, public officials, local media, government agencies, and nonprofits all working together to improve, to celebrate, and to award businesses for environmental stewardship. But the outcomes of collaborating are more diverse and much more heartwarming than just that. Here are a couple of examples of what we've accomplished through this collaboration.
Green Power's work throughout the Central Coast brings a broader perspective and network to this county committee. As an example, Leslie and I worked together to build a relationship with a Santa Cruz-based energy efficiency consultant who provides energy audits for our San Benito County businesses that we support. And this relationship has been invaluable to our efforts to support the business community in San Benito County. And another highlight of this committee has been the recent ramping up of the Green Business Program in the county, bringing these microgrants I just mentioned to local businesses and helping small business owners through what proved to be a monumentally challenging year. Despite being from a rural county with little revenue when compared to other programs across the state, the San Benito County Green Business Program exceeded its performance goals in 2019, and it earned a statewide top performer award, which was delivered by the head of the California EPA earlier this year.
And this committee is, of course, just a single example of the power of collaboration. The network and sense of community we find when working together facilitates smarter, more effective results, and it's also easy and fun to do. And speaking of easy and fun, we thought this would be a good chance to ask all of you to think for a moment about the ways you might collaborate and provide us with an opportunity after this summit to align our resources with your goals to tackle climate change. This is your chance to take meaningful action. As Assemblymember Rivas and OPR Director Kate Gordon pointed out, we need much more meaningful action at the local level now more than ever. So let's take a quick poll. We'll take a few seconds to answer the question, what is an action you could realistically see your organization taking in the next 12 months to combat climate change? And please answer with your top 3 choices. Okay, about 10 more seconds. All right, and there are the results. Okay, let's take a look. Discuss climate and sustainability issues with my board and leadership. That's great, 36%. I see engage in my industry's professional association on climate action. Awesome. Assess our climate vulnerability and eliminate non-essential single-use plastics. I think that might be my favorite answer. Lots of good energy, lots of great ideas. I see lots of good stuff here.
That's great. Yeah, it's so great to see all of those different strategies being approached. And we hope that we have an opportunity to connect with many of you in this regional climate action work in all of those ways. And on that note, this path to collaboration is paved with parties. In good years, the Monterey Bay Area Green Business Program celebrates our successes at participating breweries and event centers and more. However, obviously in this COVID-19 era, we are celebrating virtually on October 29th, and we hope you will all join. I am putting a link in the chat box right now for you to RSVP to that. And just so you know, there will be prizes for attendees from our local certified green businesses, and we'll also do fun breakout rooms with networking activities. I hope you'll join.
This is also an opportunity to announce the third Central Coast Climate Action Summit session, which will be a legislative session that's coming this spring, and the date will be announced soon, so keep an eye out. And in closing, we'd like to say thank you to MBEP, to Kate Roberts, Ashley Gower, and Maya Reed for organizing and hosting today's business session, to our wonderful partners, obviously Green Power and the business program, but also the Central Coast Climate Collaborative and CSUMB. Heartfelt thanks to the Assembly member and Kate Gordon and all of the panelists who joined us today for this collective conversation. And thank, of course, all of you for making the time to attend and to learn more about the ways in which we can all become a part of the climate change solution. Stay safe and be well.